Alan, there's a question here, and it says, do any of you know what came out of the meetings about 2 or 3 years ago when Daniel's son, it's Gabriel, I believe, right, was a guest speaker, and I believe Carolyn Bennett was there too. I think it was a 2-day seminar. Do any of you recall that? I don't recall it.
I remember that. Like well, just to answer that question, what is happening now is that the federal government is going down a road of race-based distinction politics.
Yeah.
That's what's going on, and that's not what Harry Daniels wanted, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, Gabriel and others can disagree with me, but now we've got the federal government, federal Liberal government, and the Conservative governments going down this road of race-based distinction politics, and these some of these court cases are actually like piling, and we're causing more problems than they're helping us. And so I've always been a believer that the least thing that we should do is litigate. But however, I'm kind of making myself a hypocrite because I actually am suing the federal government right now. But that's what I remember out of that meeting. That they have whatever we usually want to see come out of these court cases, and what we believe you never see, and the government always and courts always try and narrow interpretations of what goes on or what we want, and just as an example, a current example that maybe everybody would understand, that 60 Scoop case where they won that court case, and they instead of like the Indian residential schools where they had different levels of compensation for whatever happened to the children that were in the residential schools, they didn't do that for Métis. They didn't do it for Métis at all, and for First Nations and Inuit, it was it's a graduated sort of payment, and it hasn't even been finalized yet, and a healing foundation. So it's been a really interesting. It's been really interesting since post Daniels, that's for sure.
I just want to add that under the Association of Métis and Non-Status Indians of Saskatchewan, this was always our approach. This one leader used to tell me, we must negotiate first. Negotiate. If negotiation doesn't work, then we apply confrontation. A lot of our affiliates were established because of confrontation. And then he said, if that doesn't work, the last thing is litigation. That's where the Daniels case comes in. The reason why we litigated is because our people are falling through the cracks. The off-reserve members in our urban communities are falling through the cracks. Just to give you an example, out of 57,800 Métis in the province of Saskatchewan, only 15,000 are members. That leaves about 45,000 people that are not being represented as Métis and are falling through the cracks.
And
there's approximately,
sorry, go ahead.
There's approximately 175,000 First Nation people in this province out of 74 bands. However, about 65% of those people live off reserves in the urban settings, 114,570. So a lot of the people have moved out of the reserves and are now living in off reserve. And those people are falling through the cracks. And I think that's what the Daniels case was trying to achieve, is that we look after the off-reserve people. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say that, the off-reserve numbers. So I've got another comment here. Also, wouldn't the Marshall case supersede the Daniels case? I don't know anything about the Marshall case.
Well, I can. You want me to answer that, Alan?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, that's a very good question. But actually, the Marshall case and the Daniels case are two different things. That the Marshall case dealt with the Mi'kmaq, the Mi'kmaq of out east, and the Daniels case was dealing with the inclusion of Métis non-status into Section 9124. So I'm not really understanding the question with respect to the case supersede the Daniels case. Are they asking, did it come before the Daniels case? And is there a further question with respect to that? Because I'm not really understanding the question. Because both cases dealt with two different issues.
He says, that was a CAP meeting on Daniels. Gabe was there, Bennett was there, and would not take any questions. Nothing really came out of that meeting. Also says this distinction-based policy by the federal government has now impacted the news
outlets such as CBC and APTN.
Yeah, this I believe is because they get federal funding. And also he said further back that as Kim Bowden, Vice President of CAP, Congress of Aboriginal People, as a graduate of GDI, I would never have learned about my Métis family on both my mother and father's side of the family, if not for the leadership of AMNSIS in the 80s. So thanks for those comments, Kim.
Those are good comments, Kim. Thank you very much.
The Canadian Constitution recognizes God as being supreme, thereby recognizing natural law. We are born as individuals and live our lives as an individual in the eyes of God and the world. Therefore, all of our rights are individual. As with individual rights comes the responsibility for everyone to be part of the negotiations process. The Canadian Constitution of 1982, Section 32(1) and 2, recognizes First Nation, Inuit, and Métis as being equal. The Daniels versus Canada 2016 is not even needed to assert the rights of the Métis. We all have right to determine our future within Canada. We also have to be aware of the fact that the Canadian judicial system is filled with words of misdirection and double meanings, sometimes called allegory.
This icebreaker is dedicated to a friend of mine who's in the hospital right now, and he was a long time AMNSIS politician with a brilliant mind, but today he has Alzheimer's. He has dementia. I used to go visit my friend when he was in Saskatoon, and when I visit my friend, he'd be pacing the floor. I'd go and entertain him. I'd go sing gospel for him, because he loved gospel. As soon as I started singing, he'd sit down. And if I sang for an hour, he never got up once and paced. So that's the beauty of music. And that's how I comfort my dear friend. So this song I'm going to do is a song I did for him. And it's also my personal prayer. I sing this song as a personal prayer. So let me do it for you. It goes like this. I know that I'm unworthy to call upon your name. All my life I've been a sin, and for that I am ashamed. I heard you would listen, so I'm giving you my plea. I'm too unworthy worth it, Lord, to come to you. Could you please come down to me? I know that there are others who could offer more than I, but I promise you I understand. If for me you had no time, I think I had fallen, and Lord, I'm looking up to see. I'm too unworthy, Lord, to come to you. Could you please come down? Well, I guess I must be reaping from the seeds I have sown. Oh Lord, you owe me nothing. We haven't spoken for so long. If you can spare some mercy, Lord, I pledge my life. Yeah. I'm too unworthy, Lord, to come to you. Could you please come down to me?
Thank you, Alan. What a powerful video. We have a question from Ian. What happened to AMNSIS since it was such a powerful organization? That's the question, is what happened to bring AMNSIS down?
Somehow our people accepted that we become Métis specific only. As a result, the non-status Indian people stepped away altogether from that process. And we've never, since that time, have come together as a collective of people. That was a sad day, as far as I'm concerned. A sad day in the history of Indigenous people in this country. And I agree with Ian that we should have remained and be more assertive when it comes to staying together as a people. I don't know why that we lost our assertiveness at that time. Probably it was a weakness of ourselves as people at that particular time. That's probably the best way I can answer.
You know, Alan, when we talked about restarting AMNSIS for a period of probably a month and a half, 2 months, I went back and was reading the New Breed magazines. And boy, they covered everything. They didn't, gloss over anything. Like New Breed really put the politics in the paper. And this decision to split wasn't something that just happened overnight. And you could see it in the writings that were presented, and they would give rundowns of the AGAs. And this was over a period of years. And every year the discussion would come up about the MNS forming separately. They wanted to go their own way. And from an observer perspective, because like I said, I remember going to some of the meetings when I was quite young, but I was, there's always inner workings that are going on, and you don't always understand the inner workings and the inner politics. But as an observer who, watched it and then went back and was reading all the New Breed magazines, there was a few contenders against Jim Sinclair, but nobody could ever beat him out. I think that when you had such an exemplary leader who was so charismatic, who was such a good speaker, who was so inclusive, and nobody could beat him. And I think it bothered a lot of people that as a non-status, he sat at the Métis National Council's table as the representative. And they didn't, what I got from it is they felt that he couldn't be objective and represent Métis people, when in fact he did an incredible job of representing all the people. And I think sometimes that they used that as an excuse. And I think that that's exactly where we started seeing ego coming into play instead of the wellness for the people.
Yeah, I agree with you that Jim was a great leader. That's what he summoned to Robert and I, to his home, to talk about the Daniels case. He felt that nobody was dealing with the box of rights, because that's what the Daniels case gave us, is for us to begin dealing with the rights questions. Let me give you an example. He said to us, for example, health. He said, we need to establish new affiliates, because we had all these affiliates established by AMNSIS before. He felt health would be a new affiliate that we could establish. Putting Indigenous health authorities in Saskatchewan at the urban setting, at the rural setting, at the remote setting. He was interested in developing a model and in respect to dealing with our health determinants, such as cancer, such as diabetes, such as mental health, such as AIDS, and all the health determinants we have at this time. And that he felt that we should put together an Indigenous health authority to deal with those issues. And I got to agree with him, because if you take a look at where in the city of Saskatoon, who takes care of the people on the street? Our street people are forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
Who looks after their health determinants? I think if we were to establish an Indigenous health authority, we could begin to address those issues on behalf of our off-reserve Indians, for example. That's just to give you one example. Another example he gave me was justice. And Kim, as our vice president, is really an advocate for justice. I got to commend Kim Bowden for that. I watch him every now and then. He just has such passion when he talks about justice. He said that we should look at, and I know you worked for justice over the years there, Ms. LaValle. And he talked about restorative justice models that should be developed in this province. Now, when you develop restorative justice models, you don't only look at the young individual that's coming out of prison. You look at the whole family on how you can deal with that family so they can become productive citizens in the province of Saskatchewan, and to help that young person to work with his family, and they work together than just dealing with him alone. Because a lot of time after he leaves prison, he's on his own. You know, nobody helps him out. And that's where a restorative justice model can come in. Our people are overrepresented in the prison system, and we're underrepresented in the justice system. We're not in the courts. We're not being considered, dealing with the court processes and so forth. You know, one of the most powerful thing I've ever seen was one time I watched this confrontation between a young gang member and the city police of Saskatoon. The city police was very aggressive towards the individual. So in return, that young offender was also aggressive, and the two were face to face. Guess what happened? An elder intervened. A grandmother told that young offender, young native guy, to slow down. And because of the elder's intervention, he settled down. He settled right down and walked away. But still, the police force is coming on, they were determined to put him in jail. Just to give you an example, I think we need to use our elders when it comes to intervention. A council of elders to deal with the justice system. That's just one example. So